So you must ask yourself the question, is it better to feel good and be very close to dying, or to feel bad and still have 40, 50 more years ahead of you? It began up the road 7 houses away from here on January 18th, 1936. I was born at home in the back bedroom. Aunt Grace, who lived 2 houses down from here, was in attendance, my grandfather's sister-in-law. Dr. Keller came, checked in on the midwife and me and my mother, and left a bill for $2. I guess it was paid because my grandmother put the receipt for $2 in the baby book. So that was all squared away. Mm-hmm. The only thing I can tell you about my childhood, early childhood, is that I was deathly allergic to cats, and they had a cat. And my parents were ignorant about allergy. Well, my mother was 18, 19 years old. And there I was, this little day-old, week-old, month-old infant, gasping for breath, because they had a cat in the house. And I was told that they tied my arms down to keep myself from scratching my eyes out. Early on it was discovered I was allergic to the animals, horses, cats.
Huh.
I don't know how I lived to be 30 years old. I have in the other room on the shelf my diaries kept in part in 1949, written at length, in depth, every day, everything I did from 1955, 1956, 1957. If you read what I did in 1956 when I was 20 years of age, you would say to yourself, how did this man live to be 30? How did he live to be 25? I used to hitchhike. When I was 22, I left Thomaston to hitchhike to California with $5 in my pocket. Mm-hmm. I guess all kids do that. They want to see the world.
And how did that work out?
Worked out well. I was really captivated by Santa Barbara. I said, this is where I want to live the rest of my life, Santa Barbara. I'm talking Santa Barbara in 1955. I don't know what it looks like now, 60 years later. I have played jazz in Santa Barbara, I think, with Brad Terry. Since then, in 1978, we were on a bus went out there. And since then, I've been to California a few times for speaking jobs. I got a job one time. It was my first $1,000 job. I was hired to go to California for the National Blood. It was the people that cared for people with AIDS. It was the AIDS convention, I guess it was. And they were going to give this doctor every possible honor they could give him for doing great research on blood research on AIDS. And this doctor, probably brought up in Boston, educated in Boston, loved Marshall Dodge, and he loved Bert and I. Mm-hmm. And that was something that all his colleagues and friends had to put up with, because no matter what was going on, he'd want to tell a Bert and I story. So they've got me to come out there, California. They flew me out, and my job was, they were going to give this man up on the platform, give him all the awards, all the hundreds of people, doctors, all going to applaud and cheer. And then they're going to ask him, is there anything else we can do for you? Because they knew he would say, I would like to have you listen to me tell a Bert and I story. See? And they said, that is when you get up from the back of the hall, walk through the audience, waving your arms and screaming, I'm sick and tired of hearing people trying to imitate the way I talk. See? And here's the guy, it blew him right back, you can imagine. I get up on the stage, I had my LL Bean suspenders on that I just took off. And I had a pair. I'd stopped into LL Bean's on the way to the airport, bought a brand new pair of LL Bean suspenders. I said, now, to begin with, you've got to start off, part of the thing is the image. You can't tell a Marshall Dodge, Bert and I story unless you're wearing LL Bean suspenders. We get his jacket off, got these suspenders on him. And then I told one story, and I left. 5 minutes. I did 5 minutes. That was all they wanted. They said, but, the meeting planner said to me, you're not done, because tomorrow morning when the busboy brings Dr. Snaff's breakfast into him, you are going to take that tray, give him his breakfast, and you're going to stand at the foot of the bed and make him listen to you tell Bert and I stories while he eats his breakfast. And they put me on at the same time at this convention in Anaheim. I think they paid me $100 to come out. They paid my flight, but that was all right. I got to go to California and speak at this convention. They put me on at the same time as Paul Krasner. And here we are in contiguous rooms. 100 people go in to see Paul Krasner. 8 people come in to see me. And afterwards, the person who brought me out says, I want to apologize for the fact that you had such a poor turnout. And I says, don't think a thing about it. Paul Krasner is from California. Everybody knew him. They wanted to see him. I says, nobody knows me here in California. I said, in Portland, Maine, if this convention had been held in Portland, Maine, things would have been altogether different. Everyone would have gone in to see Paul Krasner, and nobody would have come in to see me. God, I can still do it, can't I? I thought I had forgotten how to tell stories. I ain't done it. I ain't been on a stage for 2-3 years. And I says, I wonder if I could do it if I had to again. I guess I can, can't I?
Yeah, George.
I'm the only college graduate, I believe, from my high school class, 1953. Back then, only rich kids went to college. You didn't think about going to college. You used to be kind of proud that you were too poor to go to college. So I can identify with people now who sneer at the intelligentsia and look down at the intelligentsia, because I was brought up in that environment. Well, no, I'm too poor to go to college. It was something you kind of boasted about. But then, my sister was a good trombone player, and she went to Eastman School of Music in 1955. She was 2 years behind me. She said, I will go down to Rochester and see if I can go to Eastman to learn to play clarinet, and like my sister did. So I went down there. After I got out of the military, I was stationed in Rockland for 2 years. That lasted about 25 years. I went down to Rochester, out to Rochester, and got a job making Edsel radios, great career.
For the Edsel
Got
car?
a job making Edsel radios at the Stromberg Carlson plant out on Goodman Street. And I took clarinet lessons in the evening from Mr. Osick. And I met a girl at Eastman at the time, and they said, Robert, you're never going to be good enough to get into the Eastman School of Music, but you might get into a state teacher's college. And I didn't know about those things. And they said, there's one in Potsdam that takes music people. So I applied to go to college at Potsdam, and I, probably because I was a veteran, I got in, because it wasn't my musical ability. I have a very good ear. No changes, but I do not have the musical ability to phrase musically when I'm playing a clarinet or piano. I can get by on bass because all you got to do is be there with the right note, not play many notes, play low bottom notes. You don't get in anybody's way, hey, you're all right. So I flunked out of music school after 2 years because I could not learn how to play. I believe I have a neurological short circuit between my head and my fingers, because what I think I'm doing is not what I'm doing. So after flunking out of Crane Department of Music after 2 years, I was working weighing trucks at the cement plant in Rockland. And I was living here at home, 7 houses up the road. I was earning maybe $25 a week. I saved every single bit of it. I had maybe $200 by the time I got laid off in the middle of the winter because there was no trucks to weigh. And I bought a one-way ticket to Gothenburg, Sweden on the Mormick Pride. My father came from Sweden. He still had sisters over there, brothers, all kinds of nieces and nephews. My father didn't talk anything about his family over there. This was before cell phones or communication, and he was not the kind to keep in touch. I had no idea what I had over there for relatives, although one of them came from Burroughs. Rosemary came from Burroughs in 1951 and lived with us up here for a few months. She worked packing fish down the Port Clyde Fish Factory. So I knew Rosemary because she'd lived with us. She was my cousin. So I showed up in this town. Nobody knew I was coming.
Which was the town that you found?
Borås, B-O-R-A-S, Sweden. It's about 50, 60 miles due east of Gothenburg. And I had no idea what I was going to do. But I had one aunt whose husband had died, and she took me in. I lived with her, sponged off her for 6 months. Learned to speak Swedish with a Maine accent. Came home. At the end of 6 months...
Can you do that?
What?
Can you do a little bit of Swedish with the...
Ja, visst. Svettiga, suttiga smiddarna, slangarna, släggen mot stängerna, då på med tängerna, formade järnet till hav och plåg. And when I used to do shows in a banquet hall, there would be little waiters setting up, and they would be from Romania, Czechoslovakia, Sweden, Norway, Finland. And when I would do a mic check, I'd say, Postoles aftona Leneca, manotivas irvilkas, felicitarla por su cumpleaños, vad ska du göra imorgon? Qu'est-ce que vous allez faire ce soir?
How many languages is that?
You know, I would say a little something in maybe 8 or 10 languages. And sooner or later, one of the waiters would look up like that. Yeah, il vorrei mangiare qualcosa con lei adesso. Ecco. You know? They don't expect to see an old man babbling 6 or 8 languages, you know, with a Maine accent. It must have been 1960, a night college program at Gorham. This was a new thing. It was like the little colleges they have now in Rockland and Thomaston. Mm-hmm. So I went down, signed up for night school. My grades were so horrible I couldn't have got into day school. And I took little courses in mathematics. I remember I had Dr. Fish for mathematics, Lincoln Fish. So my grades got up good enough, so I applied the following year and got into day school at Gorham. In '63, I went back to Sweden. The college took a trip to Europe. You know how colleges say, hey, we're all going, sign up and go to Europe with us. So I signed up and went to Europe with the Gorham people. Alston Smith, the registrar, sent us to Europe. So I went over to Sweden again. I believe my uncle got me a moped, and Tom Denon and I rode from Sweden down to Paris on these mopeds. Not in the summer of 1963. I came back home. There was headlines in the main newspaper. It said 3,000 teachers or something like that needed, 300 teachers needed in the state of Maine. So I said, whoa, maybe I can go teach school. Because I'd been to 2 years of undergraduate at the music school, and I already had 2 years of college at Gorham. 1 year of night school, 1 year of full time, I think it was. So I got a job teaching 3rd grade in Lee, Maine, up right at Beamer, Lincoln. $4,000 I was paid, which was 4 times as much as I had earned when I was in the Coast Guard. That would be like today if you were earning $25,000. All of a sudden, next year they're going to give you $100,000. You don't know what you're going to do with 4 times as much money. So I taught for a year, and then I went back to Gorham again, and graduated in 1965, I believe. I got married that year. I was down in Tense Harbor with my Model T, putting some Garlock packing in the carburetor line so it wouldn't leak. I was with a distant cousin, David Lowell, in Lowell Brothers' garage. And 3 girls walked by outside with a little brother. They'd come in on a yacht. And I see them girls, got that Model T back together again, got it out front. I was sitting there just like a piece of bait in a great big skunk trap. And I picked up them 3 girls who were riding the funny old car and the little brother. And when that yacht, the Amantha, sailed out of Tense Harbor, one of the girls stayed behind. The big sister stayed behind. She was a Vassar graduate who had translated French and English articles in a glass factory in German upon her graduation. Very, very accomplished, very clever girl. We got married. We built a house in Booth Bay Harbor. I think she bought the land for $600. It was a great piece of land. I dug down, put the foundation in, hit fresh spruce branches. See, back in 1960, the way they would get more land that they could sell over in Booth Bay Harbor, what they do is haul in dirt and fill in marshland, you know, ocean marshland. So you dig down and you come to these spruce branches that the contractors had dumped in to make more land so they could sell more house lots. So we built a house on that over there. We bought a house here in the village for $5,000, acre of land, fully furnished. Much of the furniture in this house, half the furniture that we use here came from that house. And I finished up my undergraduate at Gorham. I had to go to summer school for 2 or 3 more courses to get enough credits to graduate. I remember when I graduated, went through the ceremony, I walked across the stage. They gave me a little envelope. I opened it up. It was empty. I closed it up, looked at the audience, and smiled as if I already had it in the bag. Huh?
And why was
the
it
great
empty?
pretender.
Why was it empty?
Because I didn't have the 3 credits until the end of the summer.
Oh.
We graduated in May, and I got the credits in July, August. So that first year out of Gorham, I got a job teaching in Hampton, Connecticut. My wife got a job teaching, I don't know if it was Scotland. We lived in Scotland, Connecticut. The plan was for me to go to, or for us to go to the University of Connecticut at Storrs and get a master's degrees. I couldn't get in. I don't know if it was grades or I didn't apply early enough or something was going on. Eben Ersby, his older sister Edie lives in Maine now. She was a physician's assistant. She got me to speak at the Maine Physician's Assistants annual meeting. I got a standing ovation. I was not surprised to get the standing ovation from the Maine Physician's Assistants because their IQs are very, very high. I went to see them in Hampton, Connecticut years and years ago, and she was standing by the door. She was probably in the 8th grade at the time. She had a hand on the door casing, you know, like kids do, like this. And I closed the door and caught her hand, her fingers in the door. It's one of those things, you know.
You still feel bad about it?
I still, you know, it's one of those things that just turns your stomach. And years later, she was my physician. And I went in to see her one time. And as she pulled her rubber gloves on over those crushed fingers, she said, "I've been waiting years for this, Robert."
Well,
My wife and I went to University of Maine for a year to get master's degrees. I worked on a master's in English, and I applied for a PhD program at the University of Rochester. I was accepted. Got a full fellowship for doctorate in linguistics at the University of Rochester. And in the summer between the University of Maine, where I never did get a master's degree because I didn't write a paper, and the University of Rochester, that summer I had applied to attend the 10th International Congress of Linguists in Bucharest, Romania. And I remember being up the road here when the letter came that said, "You have been accepted to attend this conference." And I got over to Bucharest, and I went up to Christine Malman, a Dutch linguist, who was to give the people their travel expense money that they'd spent to get there. And I said, "I would like to meet the other American delegates." And she said, "There is but one delegate from each country." And I said, "What?" I said, "I am representing Harvard, Yale, MIT, and Machias State." why did you pick me? And she looks me up and down. She says, perhaps you were the only one who applied. So I went to Rochester. We went there, lived there, studied linguistics. Christmas time, my mother was coughing like I'm coughing now. She said, I am not going to live through the summer. So my wife and I dropped out of graduate school. I was going to graduate school. She was working at Rush Rees and Special Collections. I dropped out of graduate school, came home to be with my mother, who did promptly die on the 3rd of June. Meanwhile, I had got a job teaching 3rd grade down in Friendship. The principal was also the preacher at our local church. My mother was the organist, and he said, please come and take this class down in Friendship. The teacher has had a nervous breakdown. These kids are so bad that please do it. I said, okay, 3 months, I will do it. No more, I will do it for 3 months. My wife, being a very clever person, got a job as a reporter, editor for the Down East magazine. One of the assignments she gave herself was to go down to Beals Island and write an article on the president of the Maine Lobstermen's Association. The name of the article, which might have appeared in the May 1970 issue of Down East, was Ossie Beale, Maine's most active lobsterman. And when she didn't come home for 3 months, even I figured out what that meant.
Most what?
Active.
Most active.
Maine's most active lobsterman. And when she didn't come home for 3 months, even I figured out what that meant. My mother had died, my wife ran off. I did not go back to graduate school. I could not understand Chomsky. I'm not smart enough to do what is required to understand transformational grammar. It holds no interest for me. I wanted to be a philologist. Of course, I discovered that the last philologist was probably Henry Higgins or Henry Sweet, who died in 1880 or so. I wanted to be an expert on the correlation between Old English, Old Icelandic, how all the words were related, how English compares to Dutch, German, Swedish, French. And apparently there's no market for that. And of course that was before computers. We didn't going to school. There must be a snap now, because right in the papers was where I got my best grades, and you could snap them right out, you know, with a computer now. What took so long before was you make a mistake, you'd have to type the whole thing over again. Mm-hmm. So my wife had run off. As I recall, I didn't even come home from the courthouse where we were divorced. I left immediately from Rockland, hitchhiked to Boston, took a plane back to Sweden. Went to Sweden for 2 or 3 weeks, hanging out with my friends and relatives. When I came home, I was driving. I bought a new tractor. I think I'm getting this right. I taught school in Warren. When I came home, I went back to one of the workshops that the teachers, when I came home after I got divorced, when I came home from Europe after getting divorced, I went to a teacher's workshop over in Waldoboro, Warren District, and the superintendent of the school said, Robert, please come and teach. I says, I don't want to do it. I don't want to teach. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. He says, look, we will let you direct the band at Madomic Valley. So I says, okay, that sounds like a good gig. I will direct the band. I've got a college degree, and I've also got 2 years of music school. I think I can direct the band. I can do that. So I showed up for the gig in the fall. The superintendents had changed. The fellow who had hired me was gone. There was a new superintendent. The new superintendent said, and thank you for reminding me of this, I haven't thought of this for years. The new superintendent said, Robert, you have the legal contract to teach music here at Madomic this fall. However, the person who should be teaching music is the woman here who is shunted aside. She really has the moral right, although not the legal right, to teach the man. Why don't you teach something else? I says, I don't want to do it. He says, look, we'll put you one-on-one with 17-year-old boys who can't read. You don't have to go in a classroom. Sit with them. I says, okay, I can do that. I run from school to school, do special education type of thing. So I did that for a year or two. I got to use the psycholinguistics I learned at the University of Rochester, which amounts to no more than behavior modification. I knew I'd trained a rat to pretty well drive a car, so I figured if I could train a rat to pretty well get in a little toy car and drive it around the room, I should be able to teach some kids how to read. I had a very powerful reinforcing tool. These boys were 18 years old. They couldn't read, but they wanted to drive. I went over to Harold Ralph in Waldoboro and I says, Mr. Harold Ralph, I am teaching high school kids out here who can't read. I would like to do a driver education program for these students. I am licensed to teach driver education. I need a car. Would you give us a car? Yes, Mr. Harold Ralph says, I'll give you the car, you buy the gas. I said, okay, I'll buy the gas. I bought the car. They brought her this brand new umpty-ump horsepower shiny Chevrolet. And these boys who couldn't read are looking at this car. And I says, okay, you learn to read these words in the instruction manual for the driver's license. You memorize these words, memorize 100 words or so, you get drive the car for 15 minutes. Oh, these other kids didn't have driver education over there in Waldoboro. The only people who had driver education was my people. People coming up and saying, hey, Mr. Skoglund, how stupid I got to be to get in your class. I once had a class of very, very slow boys. There was one boy from Dutch Neck, I'm not going to say his name, because... And I taught that boy how to do this. And it was one of the greatest educational experiences of my life. Because it was a great improvement over this. Last, I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand teaching. I said, I am going to stop teaching. I'm going to buy myself a brand new Mercedes. I'm going to buy myself a tractor, and I'm going to mow bushes for a living. My reasoning in getting the new Mercedes was this.
I know.
A rich man buys a Chevrolet and trades every 4 years. A poor man buys a Mercedes and keeps it for the rest of his life. And it's still in the barn out there. It looks as good as it did, almost. It's never been out in the winter as it did when I bought it 41 years ago. And I mowed. What can you do when you're driving a tractor mowing fields and you have 4 years of graduate school? You think. And so I got in the habit of course, driving a tractor is why I have these pockets on my pants, because you can't have them in your back pocket, your wallet. And of course you can look like this, you know. You know who I'm talking about. These people walk around like this. They have this here. Right. They have their wallet in there. They have their glasses in there. So I said how much more efficient it would be if I had little pockets sewed on my pants, just the right size to accommodate my notebook here, my pens so I can take my notes, and I won't be sitting on that wallet. And I would think of things while I was driving. And of course I was a single man now, and there was a thing called the Maine Times back then. The first thing every hippie in Maine with a master's degree, and all hippies in Maine had master's degrees, the first thing any hippie with a master's degree in Maine looked at in that radical little magazine was the personal column. So every week, out of my tractor, I would think up some little personal to put in to the Maine Times personal column. It would say, antique dealer seeks attractive young woman interested in one nightstand. Or it might say, lonely evangelist seeks attractive young woman eager to assume missionary position in Africa. Or it might say, Maine trapper seeks attractive lady taxidermist, eager to mount 4 skins.
And they didn't edit these
And of
out?
course they did not print the last one in 1975,
Right.
but they have printed it several times since. So, so the restrictions on what can be said on television and printed in newspapers has changed quite a bit over the past 40, 50 years. I used to answer every single one of those, I think. As I recall, I used to answer it, just right to a box, and I would have a thing that I would type out or print out and mail to these every week. And I would make arrangements when any answered. I would make arrangements, and at 6 o'clock in the evening I might see a girl in Brunswick and have a cup of tea. At 7:30 I might see a girl in Bath and have a cup of cocoa. At 8:30 I might see a girl in Wiscasset and have a can of Pepsi Cola. Because I had to stop because my kidneys gave out. I can still do it, can't I? I can still do it. I can still do it. I'm so glad to see you laugh. You know, that makes me feel good, because I really thought I might have lost the ability to articulate my sentiments in a manner that would cause people to sneer. What happened was I was going to the Camden Singles Club. It was called the Black Flies. Well, the Camden Singles Club. They held it in the cellar of this church in Camden. And all these hungry, unmarried men would show up. They were baited, as it were. And they had a big table, and we'd all sit down and eat. And there would be a program, somebody would say, well, I've spoken at the thing. And after the supper, at one of these suppers, there was a woman there who passed her hand over the table. She seemingly passed her hand over the table, and all the mess and rubble was cleaned up. And I said, this is quite a remarkable thing. And I invited this woman down to my house. And she came down to my house, and she opened the cupboard door and looked, and she took all the dishes out, and she washed all the dishes, and she washed the cupboard, and she put in new paper, and she put the dishes back. Well, she kept coming back. Every time she came down, she'd scrub the walls, she'd scrub the floors, she'd make the beds. And one of the great things in my cupboard was this potato that was on the shelf. And this potato had grown out a little leader or stem, whatever it was called. It crept through the cupboard like this until it had finally ossified into its present state. And it was an object of curiosity for photographers from New York who would come by and eagerly take pictures of a hermit's cupboard in Maine. And all this stuff was thrown out. Well, she butchered the pig, chopped it up, and put the pig in little papers, put it in the deep freeze. She scraped and painted the outside of the house. You know, she took a hose, went down and washed down the cellar walls, and then I stopped seeing her. And I had some friends, I said, for heaven's sakes, Robert, why did you stop seeing her? And I said, I just can't bring myself to be seen in public with a woman who always has such red, chapped hands.
Good. So how long have you been married now?
24 blissful years. You will recall that I was writing for 55 newspapers years and years ago. The way I marketed my writing business was having an annual lobster picnic.
Mm-hmm.
I would send out 5,000 pieces of direct mail in a box like this. I would take to the post office and mail it to 5,000 editors all over the United States. Say, come to the Humble Farmers annual free lobster picnic. And they would think it was a joke, or nobody's going to give a free lobster to anybody that shows up, but it was a true thing. And the first time we had it might have been 1982, Gramp Wiley was here. And it grew and it grew and it grew until 1991, 92, 93. It was getting so there was 1,000. Have you ever attended one?
Actually not. I think you'd ended it by the time I became aware of it.
It's a misstatement. I did not end it.
I know.
Okay. So this was a big
Got
thing.
out of hand.
I got so that it was sponsored. Canes would send, give me jars of mustard and mayonnaise, and Jim Bennett from Oakhurst Dairy would send up cases of drinks. Coca-Cola people would come, set up coolers with big things. None of this cost anything. The toilet paper people would send cartons this big of toilet paper for my outdoor privies. I had a 40 by 80 circus tent. I did not perform at this. There would be 1,000 people there. I did not perform. My friends did. Jackson Gilman, Tim Sample, Nick Apollonio. 50 people to run it. Mark Usinger would stand right there with his wife Margot and wash dishes for 3 hours. It would take 15, 20 people just to direct the park in and have them all parked so they could get in and get out. I was in charge of the stage. I had a great big stage. It was 25 feet wide under this great big circus tent. I had chairs. It was getting going good. I would go on talk radio all over the United States. Seattle, Spokane, Fort Worth, Schenectady, 50,000 watt station, Salt Lake City, Fort Worth, I think I mentioned. And I would invite everyone listening to come to my home for my annual free lobster picnic. It was 6 hours of non-stop entertainment. You got 20 minutes, no setup time. 20 minutes you were on and you were off. I've seen Angus there, Susan Collins, Governor Brennan. Everybody has been here. Everybody would come. It was a good time to meet people, you know, if you were selling a product or something. So this was going along very smoothly. Masha hated this. She said, how can you give a free lobster to all these freeloaders? My friends, right? Buses from Boston would come up. Tour buses found out about it. It would be written up in the University of Rochester Alumni Magazine. Well, it was my marketing tool to sell my newspaper column. And then I figured when I got in 100 newspapers, I would go on the stage. There was a guy named Bob Yoakum, who was a friend of Art Buchwald, I think, lived up in northwest Connecticut. Bob Yoakum spoke at the New England Press Association one time. And I listened to Bob Yoakum and I said, I cannot do any better than Bob Yoakum, but I can do as well speaking as Bob Yoakum. I will go on the stage when I get to 100 newspapers, because you put this up because it's a very scary thing. If you have never stood on the stage and spoke to people, it's a scary. I can remember when I finally was asked by Gene to come down to New Hampshire and do my first talk. I got $30. My heart was beating so. How old was I? I might have been 47 years old. My heart was beating just like this. I really thought I might die from a heart attack. I was so scared. And I went out before the audience and read some of my funny stories and crept back. I'll never forget it. It was scary. I sent a notice to all the chambers of commerce in Maine, said for $125 I'd come and do a talk. If you hired me, I'd do it again for them for free. Sam Collins said one of his friends saw me speak somewhere. Sam said, they said you were kind of serious. The sweat. I'd be soaked with sweat. I was so scared. Because it takes years to get rid of that fear, so you can just come out and say, hi, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. A well-known Maine humorist came to Rockland to speak. He was hired by the Rockland Chamber of Commerce. Lawyer Crandall had told me the famous story about the three-legged pig, which you recall.
No.
And I wrote the story of the three-legged pig up for the Courier Gazette. Ray Gross printed it that week for my newspaper column. And you will recall the story when I tell it. Winky was riding by this farmer's house one day and he saw this three-legged pig. So he stopped and went in and says, why does your pig only have 3 legs? And the farmer says, that's a valuable, remember the story now? The farmer says, that's a valuable pig, sir. my tractor rolled over out in the field last year. Pig saw that my tractor had rolled over, ran up to the house and jumped up against the door, squealing and kicking it, pounding at that door. My wife came out and that pig bit her right by the apron, dragged her out to where I was with the tractor. They called the medics, they got me up from under the tractor. I was saved. That's a valuable pig, sir, that's a valuable pig. He says, yes, but why does the pig have 3 legs? And the farmer says, last year, while I was out in the field, he says the wood stove there dropped a couple of ashes out back by the smokestack there, and caught the place. Fire started smoking smolder. That pig see it. He rushed out into the field, got right in front of the tractor, danced around on his hind legs, squeaked and squawked till I stopped, turned around, see the little smoke coming out. I got home and I got home and was able to put that fire out. That's a valuable pig, sir. And Winky says, yes, but why does the pig have 3 legs? And the farmer says, well, it's a valuable pig, sir. You can't believe I'm going to eat a pig like that all at once. And this story, Lawyer Crandall told me, I wrote it up and put it in the Courier Gazette. Well, anyway, everybody in Rockland had read the story in my column, and this unfortunate Maine humorist gets up on the stage and tells the story of the 3-legged pig after everybody in the audience had just read it about a day before. I say, it was the most horrible thing that can ever happen to you. And Crandall says, well, he says, Skog, it was quite terrible. He says, he told that story of the pig. He says, why don't, he was a terrible speaker. He says, why don't you go on the stage? So that's when I started. So it must have been around 82, about the time I was having the picnic. So all that started. So I started, and I was mailing, and wow, the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald. The Boston Herald did a cover story on me in 1988. I had spoken at the National Association of Newspaper Columnists, and one of the columnists there worked for the Boston Herald, and he did a story on me, even as you're doing a story on me now. And it got me a full page picture of me right on the cover of the Boston Herald. This was a very good thing. It was coming along nicely. Marcia hated this picnic. She could not see that it was marketing, and that 20 years down the road, people would come up to me and say, Humble, I never forget your lobster picnic. But for $1,500 worth of lobsters and the labor from 50 of my friends, I was getting all this fantastic marketing. It was just starting to catch on. Richard Carpenter would mention it in the Boston Globe. I went on the radio with Larry Glick, Norm Nathan, down in Boston at WBZ. Dave Maynard, I think it was Dave Maynard, Norm Nathan. Dave Maynard one time got 300 letters when I was on asking for a free ticket to the Humble Farmers Annual Free Lobster Picnic. He mailed them to me in a big bunch. They all contained a self-addressed stamped envelope into which I put a numbered ticket. There was never any standing in line, so you had to rush to get ahead of anybody else. Did it with the numbers. Okay, we're serving now between 50 and 25. If you had a lower number, you moved right up. So there was never a crowd. You always got to enjoy the show. It was very well organized. I had friends, Kevin Bernard, who made me great, huge signs, $3,000–4,000 worth of professional signs I had. Everybody contributed. It was a great time. Marcia says, freeloaders, freeloaders. And if a woman wants to shut something down, she has ways of making you shut things down. She just said, you will not do it. I can't stand having all these people. I said, they won't come in the house. You can go away before they come. Be away for that day. She has to have her way. She shut it down. So what it effectively did was keep me from marketing. But in 1988, I was doing 3 talks a week. One in New Brunswick, one in Florida, maybe one in northern Vermont. If there's anything positive to be said about not doing talks, because of the butterfly effect, I've often thought, rationalized, and said, well, if she had continued to let me continue speaking, there's a chance I would have got killed in an automobile accident in northern New Hampshire coming home late from some speaking gig. The radio started on April 6, 1978.
And that was with Maine Public Radio.
Maine Public Radio. I was asked to do a show. I will tell you how that came to pass. I was out on my front lawn when my tenant from the house next door, this house right here, Hermina Lazansky comes over to my front lawn. She says, Maine Public Radio is playing a communist folk singer singing from Guatemala. He is singing, kill the landlords and throw their bodies on the field. Their blood will make good fertilizer. So I call Maine Public Radio, and with great feigned indignation I say, why are you playing this communist folk singer who is playing songs and singing, kill the landlords? I have Spanish-speaking tenants in my house next door. And they said, boo, 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 boo. Everybody points the finger and says, but we don't have nothing to do with the program, and it comes on microfiche from Boston or something. Say, do you want to do a jazz show? And I said, how do you know that I know about jazz? And they says, you sent in $5 one time to hear Harry Connick. So I went up and did a pilot. Janice Gray, as I recall, did big reel-to-reel things. This was in Orono. Every week I would drive to Orono and make this program. Janice Gray would push the buttons for me. I would play the records and say something in between the records. And here again I was scared and shaky when I did it. And then they moved the studio down to Bangor, so I didn't have so far to go. And I finally got them to let me run the machine, show me how to run them big reel-to-reels myself. And many years later, after driving to Bangor innumerable times, as a volunteer for the people of Maine to provide them with entertainment, I bought my own equipment. I bought a DAT machine for $1,000, which went out of use very quickly. It was outdated. And I bought CD players, and I bought a board so I could mix the stuff. So I made the program at home and set it in on DAT tapes. And then I sent it in on discs, on CDs. And at that time I'd gone to a couple of public radio program convention meetings, and my show was also being run in New Mexico and Public Radio Miami, which was very good because I was finally starting to get paid for doing radio. Miami was paying me $30 a week, and New Mexico was paying me $30
it became
a week,
syndicated.
which is big money. And if I had known about this 37 years ago, I would have done it like Garrison Keillor, and I would have been probably doing very well by now. So then I started making them on CDs. There came a time when the CDs would misfire. If you would listen to my program, it would say, and now the humble farmer will be talking about, the humble farmer will be talking about, the humble farmer will be talking about, the humble farmer. Rich Tozier would let that run for about 5 minutes, and then he would come and say, we seem to be having technical difficulties with the humble farmer. And Charles Beck made me send they said, you're sending us the wrong kind of CDs, and they made me package it in a certain way and wrap it in a certain way. I had to jump through all these hoops. Nobody was having any trouble with it in Miami or New Mexico. But boy, they got really, and it got so that Rich Tozier was listening to my programs to see if I said anything controversial on them so they could not run them. And it came to pass, there was one program that didn't go on because I think it had that letter in it. I think that was it. I think that never got aired, I'm not sure. But then I had the habit of reading the encyclopedia every morning in the bathroom. And I just open it at random and read. And I would usually get something, and I'd bring the encyclopedia down, I'd write it in my book, or else I'd put it in the computer and just give a rant, didn't I? And I happened one day to read about this Italian who got a Nobel Prize, and it was in conjunction with Mussolini seizing power in Italy and how he had done it. So I read this definition of fascism that I read in the Encyclopedia Britannica. And the Blue Maine Public Radio, Charles Beck went right through the roof and wrote me letters saying there'd be no more of this foolishness. Because anyone who listened to this could quite easily see that it was the same platform as the Republican Party in the United States. For 6 months, as I recall, I didn't make any commentary at all on my program. I just played the music without saying anything. And at the end of 6 months, by then they had the motions they were afraid to throw me off for fear that the Maine Civil Liberties Union or something like whatever that thing is, would come down on them. Because I had so many friends. They knew I had friends in powerful places. That I wouldn't do anything, but these other people would be very annoyed and grab them. So they went through the right legal way of writing the letter, warning me about this and that. Send me I can show it to you. It's about 7 printed pages of what I could and could not do. What it amounted to is I couldn't syndicate my program to the other 2 stations. The first person to send me a check for $100 was a Republican from Camden. And since then, a few, not as many as I'd like, but a few people have sent me MPBN money when it comes pledge time. Every time they hear MPBN crying out for money, they say, God, that reminds me, it's time to send Humble a check. I have probably got a $20 bill right in my pocket right now that came in an envelope that was unmarked, that just addressed to the humble farmer.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. I don't get enough of them, but there are 2 or 3 people who still are very annoyed that they no longer hear Humble on Friday nights, because it was... My friends bought me a Canon GL2 camera and said, Humble, you will do television. They showed me how to use this little Let's Edit program, and they showed me how to... So I ran around making things with my camera, and now you can see 20 or so of my TV programs on YouTube. You Google Robert Carl with a K, K-A-R-L, Robert Carl Skoglund, and a whole string of my programs will turn up. It was quite a mysterious thing, and you really had to be rich to have solar panels or a little windmill. And years and years and years went by, 20 years anyway, before I suddenly became interested in heating my water with the rays from the sun and generating my electricity. I know how it happened. I was down at the Blue Hill Common Ground Fair, and there was a gentleman there with white hair and very clear blue eyes. And he said, Humble, we need you on Maine Public Radio. And when somebody with long hair and clear blue eyes says to you, Humble, you're needed on Maine Public Radio, you'd better watch your back. And we started to make these things. Said, well, what's the big deal? All you're doing is put metal pipe in a wooden box. I mean, how long is it going to take to learn about that? It's just such a simple thing. An 8th grade girl with opposable thumbs could put this together. You go up to Lowe's and you get this cheap fiber board about this big, $5 a sheet, nail that on the back. So we did that. You glue the thing in. You didn't need to glue it. Within 4 years, that back part had rotted off and fallen away, just decomposed. I improved these collectors by putting glass in the back. You get a glass door at the dump, you take a knife and you cut that glass door in 2. That glass comes double glass. So you got the same size for the front, same size for the back. You take your board about this big, your 2x6 plank or whatever it is. I would get pressed, I would use pressed lumber, and I would cut little slots in it and I would fit the glass in, front and back. That way you don't have any metal things to hold it together. Use stainless steel screws. It's very simple. Copper pipe in there, and you take 10-inch aluminum flashing, put a little bend in it so you can glue it with caulking compound to the pipe. That's all there is to it. Sunny day like today, I turn this valve here, I turn 2 valves there, pumps that hot liquid from the top of my hot water heater out there, hot pumps it through the floor. Put that room right below us, drive it right up to 80, 82. You don't want it. Last November 3rd, when we had the power outage for 3 days, Marsha and I huddled in our cellar like little animals in the winter because it was the only warm room in the house. Yes, my friends who showed me how to make the hot water heaters also showed me how to make little electric panels. You buy the little teeny-weeny elements, I guess. They're very thin, and you solder them all together and laminate them under a piece of glass and put a metal picture frame around them. And this is the model they use in Guatemala, countries in Africa. where they do not have any electricity and they have never had electricity. And they make the panels small so you can take it on a donkey and carry it up through the mountains. And my friend Rich Comp is a great man. He goes to Indonesia, Africa, all these places, showing people who live out in the jungle how to solder these things together, put them together, and have a electric light or radio or a television.
Mm-hmm.
And people will come in to steal these things, but then they found out if anybody stole it, it would take away their ability to watch television. So they have a guard there all the time. Nobody's going to steal these things, or it's shut down on television. So what happened? My friend showed me how to make these panels.
Mm-hmm.
And I built a rack on my hen house to hold these panels. And I tried to hook them up and tried to get them hooked up. It's a very mysterious thing. If you've never done it, don't know how to do it, you don't know who to ask. And I finally, you have to get permission from Central Maine Power and fill out papers. Mm-hmm. I finally took them up to Revision Energy. And I said, I want to hook up these panels. And they looked at it and studied it and measured it. And what they said basically amounted to, this is crap. You ain't got nothing here. So I came home almost in tears. I had worked for 3 years to build these panels and to set them up so I could generate my own electricity, and it wasn't going to work. And I got home and there was a message on my answering machine that says, Humble, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to give you some panels. We're going to take the inverter you have there, and we're going to give you a smaller inverter, and we're going to set you up some panels. So John Luft and his friends at Revision came down, used my rack, put up 2 rails, put 6 230-watt panels there, put a Sunny Boy inverter up there, got the permission to run it through Central Maine. So I was generating some of my power with solar electricity from the sun. Generate more than I need in the summer, and it goes into my bank. And then, as I say, when the days get bitter cold, the end of August, we can start cranking up our electric heat and move into this small room and not have to buy oil. Great saving.
Mm-hmm.
I have to use that electricity that I've banked within a year. If you don't use it within a year, Central Maine takes it back. But there's no chance of them getting it if you're going to use electric heat in Maine. I'm very excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I go out and see how much I've generated. Some days you gain kilowatt hours, some days you lose kilowatt hours. Last month I gained 113 kilowatt hours. $10.65 a month. I say it's a bargain deal. $120 a year. Central Maine will store my electricity and give it back to me at night when I need it. This is what's going to happen inevitably. It's going to happen to our electric companies. They're going to be making electricity with solar panels. They're going to have to. There ain't going to be no oil in 100 years. They're going to be making the electricity with solar panels, and they're going to be selling it to us. Or they're just going to be a medium of exchange, and they're going to use the solar panels, the electricity that we have generated with our solar panels, storing it for us and giving it back. They're just going to be a clearinghouse, a warehouse, I think.